That was the maximum, and we reached 3.6 in mid of 2016, which put us from an exporting to importing country. So that was a lot of pressure on the economy. But with the recent discoveries, now Zohr gas production is about 2 billion cubic feet. We turn back again in a few months ago back to be self-sufficient when it comes to gas. Oil, we still import 30% of our consumption of oils.
In 2018, the government continued its 5-year plan to gradually cut subsidies on fuel and electricity to reduce expenditure and balance its budget deficit. The revenue has also been used to pay off the $6 billion debt owed to the foreign oil companies. And this has paved the way for more investments in oil exploration in the Red Sea and Mediterranean.
We have a lot of new technology going to be implemented to basically increase the production in the Gulf of Suez. We can't forget the Red Sea, and Egypt is doing seismic now for the Red Sea, and now we will be able to open new concession for exploration for the Red Sea at Gulf of Suez with the oil. Mediterranean, I think Zohr is a good start. I think the East Mediterranean, or what he calls the Nile Delta Basin, which covers North Egypt.
More oil and gas discoveries will also provide enough energy needed for the growing number of industries and foreign investments being poured into the country. Experts say 2019 could see further expansion and more revenue from the energy sector, as Egypt is expected to become a major exporter of natural gas in the region. Yes, Hakeem for CGTN, Cairo.
In South Africa, 2018 has been a year of significant changes, starting with the change in the country's leadership, which happened in December 2017. Many local and international analysts, along with investors, saw former President Jacob Zuma as the main reason for South Africa's woes, including increased and pervasive corruption and sluggish economic growth. Angela Coppola has the story.
Analysts are divided about whether Mr. Zuma was painted as a scapegoat for broader problems within the ruling ANC.
Fundamentally, many of the problems that South Africa confronts were not Zuma problems specifically. They're long-standing structural problems that are inherent in the governance choices that the ruling party itself has made. That go back into the 1990s.
In his maiden speech in the country's parliament, Ramaphosa made several promises, some of which he's acted on quickly, and others have proven to be more complicated.
There's been a lot of tough talk on corruption. There's been some material movement on repairing the SOEs, although that's a long-term project because their problems predated Zuma, and they'll likely be with us for years to come.
Ramaphosa is in electioneering mode for the national elections in 2019. Analysts say he needed a rallying call. He chose property expropriation without compensation.
But I can say that of all the issues that that exist to kind of build a mandate for, this is the one that he seems to have chosen more than anything to build a mandate around.
The property issue is a thorny one and could scare international investors away.
We don't hear senior officials talk about expropriation without compensation. We hear them talk about land reform. Land reform is, of course, a much more uncontentious issue. Expropriation without compensation is a very specific policy option that implies greater discretion for the state to intrude on private property rights.
Analysts say that Ramaphosa and the ruling party are going to have to tread carefully, balancing the needs of South African citizens with those of local and international investors.
The transition between Mr. Zuma and Mr. Ramaphosa has been relatively well managed by the party. It's now moving on to that next level, and whether that expropriation without compensation is going to work for Mr. Ramaphosa. I'm Angelo Copper for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's head west of the continent now. This year has been more or less a mixed year for the Nigerian economy. Despite exiting a recession in 2017, recovery has been a very slow process for Africa's largest economy. And with general elections scheduled for early in the new year, things are likely to get a bit tough before they get better. Here is CGTN's Deji Badmus with the year in review for Nigeria.
2018 was supposed to be the year Nigeria consolidated on its recovery from recession, which it exited the year before. But the recovery has been anything but smooth. It's been slow and quite painstaking. First quarter GDP of 2018 came in at 1.95%, but by the second quarter, it was slower at 1.50% and marginally back up to 1.81% in the third quarter. The figures were a far cry from government's projection of 3.5% and quite lower than the country's projected population growth rate of around 3% annually.
The non-oil sector still have, it's not performing as well as it should. And that is why we haven't seen the kind of dramatic improvements in growth.
But the good news for Nigeria is that for the better part of 2018, inflation trended downwards. Despite that, though, the country's central bank still maintained a tighter monetary policy stance all through the year in order to stabilize the exchange rate.
The central bank is doing everything to maintain exchange rate stability, and it cannot really afford to, at this point in time, when the country is approaching a national election, to allow Naira to devalue materially. But its capacity to maintain that, or how long it can continue to support the market and support the exchange rate, will depend on what happens in the crude oil price market.
Another major highlight for Nigeria in 2018 is the country's budget impasse. After several back and forth between the executive and the legislature, Parliament approved the budget in May, while the President signed it into law in June, 6 clear months into the year. The budget delay further compounded issues for the Nigerian stock market, which also took a big hit from the political tension in the country over next year's election. As at September, the market's all-share index had dipped by minus 11.3%, the highest dip on the continent at the time.
One of the challenges we also had was the slow reform, or the sluggish reform, or even the absence of reform in the oil and gas sector. This sector is very strategic and very critical to this economy. Our expectation was that by the end of this year, we'll have seen some significant movements in terms of reforming the sector.
2018 is also one year Africa's telecoms giant MTN would wish things had been different for it in its largest market. Just as it was coming out of a settlement over a hefty fine for breaching Nigeria's telecoms regulators' directive on deactivating unregistered lines, Nigeria's central bank hit it with another fine for allegedly breaching the country's forex laws. While its case with the central bank has now been settled, it's still battling the office of Nigeria's Attorney General in court over a $2 billion tax demand. Everyone thought 2018 was the year a Nigerian national airline was going to hit the skies after a very long hiatus. But after putting so much into the planning, the government suspended it over investors' apathy.
Only 6% is our tax to GDP ratio, is one of the lowest in the world.
Kemi Adeosun was widely considered a shining star in President Buhari's cabinet. But in September, she resigned as Minister of Finance following a media report she had forged a certificate exempting her from the mandatory National Youth Service every Nigerian graduate is expected to undergo. It's indeed not been an easy year for Nigeria as far as the economy goes. And unfortunately, the horizon doesn't look bright. Oil prices are falling, and if they continue that way, it means the country will face a further challenge in 2019. Of course, the government is doing all it can to diversify the economy, but it will take some time before the impact of that hits the streets. Deji Badmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
It's been a busy year for technology. Some say the sector took a leap forward, while others say a number of mishaps and controversies set the industry back. CGTN's Mark Neal looks at the biggest tech developments of 2018.
Robots that can stack boxes, do backflips, and run out in the open. This year, robots combined with artificial intelligence got smarter and, to many, creepier.
For my lab, AI is not about self-consciousness, those kind of things, but rather for us, AI is more about autonomy. But in the general public, when you say AI, people think about, oh, robots, self-aware, Terminator kind of thing. And that has a long, long, long way to go.
But some, including academics, warn that more attention needs to be paid to ethics. Technology ethics professor Brian Patrick Green says that on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being most concerned, he rated his worry over the future of robotics and artificial intelligence at an 8 or 9.
The world already has plenty of problems in it, right? And AI and robotics and machine learning technologies are just going to take the problems we already have and amplify them.
Some of the simplest technologies also took investors on a wild ride. Rentable electric kick scooters caught on so fast that the first U.S. startup out of the gate, Bird, earned a $2 billion valuation in 4 months.
Scan it.
But cities struggled to balance the convenience with safety and keeping streets clean. Many places like San Francisco banned the scooters temporarily, while taking the time to decide on a few winners that would be granted permits to operate legally. Hating speed seemed to be a way of life this year for social media giant Facebook. The firm Cambridge Analytica, which did work for the Trump presidential campaign, developed an app for Facebook that allowed it to gain personal data from 87 million Facebook users.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. It was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
This year, Facebook was also accused of sharing users' personal data with more than 150 companies long after it said it had stopped doing that. And after a U.S. Senate report claimed that Russia's Internet Research Agency had sent propaganda to black voters during the 2016 U.S. presidential election, the National Association for the Advancement of Color People called for a national logout of Facebook. Another tech billionaire who courted controversy throughout the year was Tesla CEO Elon Musk. He smoked marijuana, now legal in California, on a radio show and came under fire after tweeting, "Am considering taking Tesla private at 420. Funding secured." The U.S. Security and Exchange Commission came down hard on Musk for having not discussed specific deal terms with any potential financing partners, forcing him to step down as Tesla chairman of the board, though he remains CEO.
I still think he's a visionary. I think people question how some of his views go beyond his genius.
In September, Apple unveiled its new iPhone XS models, starting at a base price of $1,000. But shortly after, other smartphone makers took much greater risks. Samsung showed off its Infinity Flex display.
When it's open, it's a tablet, offering a big screen experience.
But just days earlier was beaten to the punch by Shenzhen and Silicon Valley-based startup Royal.
You can actually turn around. They can tell you're using the other side. So this is the second phone. We're using dual SIM cards here. So there's basically 2 smartphones together in this Flex Pi and a tablet together.
With more companies expected to introduce foldable phones in 2019, it will be up to consumers to decide whether they're happy having 1, 2, or 3 screens right inside their pocket. Mark New, CGTN, San Francisco.
All right, this is Africa Live on CGTN. We have a lot more news coming your way, including it's 60 years of the Smurfs.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle.
But fans of the blue creatures in other parts of the world will also have a chance to see it, as plans are being made to take the show on the road in the new year.
Veronique Culliford, daughter of Smurfs creator Pierre Culliford, is attending a celebration to mark the 60th anniversary of the Smurfs. The blue creatures were first introduced as comic book characters in 1958, created by the Belgian cartoonist who used the pseudonym Peyu. Their stories center around their adventures against the evil wizard Gargamel, who obsesses over capturing them and destroying their village. Celebrations are being held at the Smurf Experience interactive exhibit in Brussels. The show is spread over 1,500 square meters, boasting 9 rooms, as well as an array of audio and video presentations. The Smurfs dwell in mushroom-like homes and are said to stand only 3 apples high. The true attraction, however, is the chance to get to their eye level. The Smurf Experience will run at the Brussels Expo Event Center till January 27, 2019. Organizers say plans are in place to take it around the world.
From 2019, the Smurf Experience will be on an international tour. At the moment, it's impossible to tell where it will go, but we have very serious contacts in Europe, in the United States, and in Asia, because Asian fans are also very fond of the Smurfs.
Sun Wei, CGTN.
China is this year celebrating 40 years of reform and opening up. We have been giving you a sense of what the process is all about. Today we look at popular local phrases in Chinese terminology. CGTN's Jonathan Betts tells us more on the term drag in one's dead.
In 2011, a hit-and-run incident in northeast China turned into a national story. After killing one student and injuring another, the young perpetrator threatened the victim with consequences if she pressed charges. That was already bad enough. The young man also had to drag in his dad, frantically bragging about how important his father is. This approach only landed him in prison faster, and it cost his dad his position. The incident disgraced the father's name more than the troublemakers, as netizens sarcastically used it online. Quote, "One can work hard, one can study hard, but this is no match for having a powerful dad like Li Gong." Thus, the expression, drag in one's dad, was later used to describe putting someone else in trouble or in a difficult situation. Though it can apply to anyone, not necessarily dads, its origin has never been forgotten. Whenever similar cases appear, people still associate them to the name Li Gong. By highlighting traditional problems such as abuse of privilege and corruption, the expression also serves as a deterrent, more than it might seem. It left society more alert to social unfairness and helped check such problems. Nowadays, the expression is more often used humorously to describe being caught by surprise.
And a bit of news from the world of cricket. South Africa claimed a 6-wicket victory over Pakistan on day 3 of the first test at CGTN. The Proteas made light work of the visitors' attack in bowler-friendly conditions as Hashim Amla and Dean Elgar scored half-centuries to steer the home side to victory with 2 days to spare. Here's CGTN's CS Duplessis with more.
It was exactly the kind of start to the international season that the cricket supporters of the Rainbow Nation would have been looking for. A comfortable win over a dangerous and unpredictable opponent on a tricky surface. Opening batsman Dean Elgar admitted it was a tough battle to chase down the modest total against a quality bowling attack.
Pakistan side has really brought some very good seamers. They exploit our conditions if there's a bit of swing around. And if there's no swing, the wicket will assist them with a bit of sideways movement and a little bit of up and down movement. So it was hard work. It was right up there with another really tough but satisfying and successful day for us.
The Pakistan captain, who like his counterpart failed to score a single run in both innings, was very satisfied with the performance of his bowlers, but conceded that it wasn't an easy pitch to bat on.
All batsmen are struggling, so it is not an easy test pitch. You know, batting is very difficult. The pitch, if you call this is a bowling paradise pitch, I think so both team batsmen are struggling. I think for me, this call of a bowling paradise pitch.
South Africa have now beaten their opponents from the subcontinent in 13 of the last 24 encounters and leaves the home side in a good position going into the next clash. but the skipper believes there's room for improvement ahead of the match that gets underway on the 3rd of next month.
Luckily for us, we're starting with a win, which is great. To start the series like that, 3-match series, you always want to make sure you start well. I think both teams played really good cricket, but also showed some average sessions during the test match, and we want to learn from that. We want to get better.
The 6-wicket victory here is the 7th Test triumph of 2018 and a satisfying way to end off what has been a successful year. The focus will shift swiftly to the 2nd Test in Cape Town, where the home side will be looking to reintroduce the veteran seamer Vernon Philander and pile even more pressure on the visitors, who will need to lift themselves to keep the series alive. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Centurion.
And in tennis, there was more good news for South Africa on Friday as Kevin Anderson secured a place in the Mubadala World Tennis Championship Finals after beating world number 2 Rafael Nadal in his semifinal. Anderson, ranked 6th in the world, came back from a set down to beat Nadal 4-6, 6-3, 6-4. Anderson will now face world number 1 Novak Djokovic in Saturday's finals. Earlier, Austria's Dominic Thiem lost 6-2, 6-3 to South Korean Yun Chung in the tournament's 5th playoff match. In the other semifinals, Novak Djokovic beat Russia's Karen Khachanov. The Serb began the first set strong before Khachanov fought back, breaking